The emergency meeting room of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy. Alien delegates from across the galaxy gathered in the massive chamber, their holographic screens lighting up one by one. At the center podium stood Ambassador Vrel, a tall creature from the Vorentine Empire, with her glowing eyes that showed clear disgust. Vrel's voice came through the translation device, turning his alien clicks and buzzes into words everyone could understand. My fellow council members, the humans have done something that changes everything. They have built something we have never seen before. The massive central screen flickered on. Security footage from a probe at the edge of known space appeared. What the cameras captured made every delegate in the room stop, breathing for a moment. A ship emerged from the black void of space. But calling it a ship felt wrong. It was more like a floating city, a moving fortress. Something so enormous that it actually bent the light around it as it moved through space. The military analyst, a robotic being covered in sensors, stepped forward with trembling limbs. Council members, this vessel measures 47 kilometers from front to back. To put that in perspective, that is longer than some of your planetary cities. The mass readings show it weighs as much as a small moon. Our instruments cannot even measure how much power this thing generates. It simply goes beyond our scales. Vrel's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. The humans call this monstrosity the Indomitable. It is what we classify as a Titan-class vessel. Do you understand what that means? No species in our entire recorded history, spanning more than 10,000 years, has successfully built a working Titan-class ship. Most civilizations destroy themselves trying. The power requirements alone should be impossible for a species as young as humanity. Murmurs spread through the chamber like wildfire. Delegates whispered each other in dozens of languages. Some looked frightened. Others looked angry. A few looked impressed, though they tried to hide it. In the human section of the council chamber, Ambassador Kate Morris sat perfectly still. She was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. While aliens around her panicked and shouted, she simply sat there with the smallest hint of a smile on her lips. She offered no defense for what her species had built. She made no excuses. She did not even try to explain. She just waited. Ambassador Vrel slammed his appendage on the podium, demanding attention. This cannot stand. Humanity joined the Galactic Council only 200 years ago. They are children compared to civilizations like mine, which has existed for over 40,000 years. And yet they dare to build a weapon of this magnitude? This threatens every species in the galaxy. This tips the balance of power in ways we cannot predict. Other delegates began shouting their agreement. The Kelrite representative, a being made of crystalline structures, projected its voice across the chamber. What if they decide to use this against us? What if humanity decides they no longer need the council? What if they want to conquer instead of cooperate? A delegate from the peaceful El Durin species stood up, their translucent forms shimmering with concern. We invited humanity into our council as equals. We shared our technology with them. We welcomed them into our galactic community. Is this how they repay our trust? By building weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Through all of this, Kate Morris remained silent. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. She simply observed, taking mental notes of who spoke against humanity and who remained quiet. Her face showed no emotion, but her mind worked rapidly, calculating and planning. Vrel raised his voice over the chaos. I formally move that this council demands humanity immediately dismantle the Indomitable and any other ships of its class. Furthermore, I move that we impose strict limitations on human military development. They have proven they cannot be trusted with such power. The chamber erupted again. Some delegates shouted their support. Others demanded time to investigate. A few brave voices called for caution, suggesting they should at least ask humanity why they built such a vessel before condemning them. We will vote on this matter in 1 week, declared the council speaker, an ancient being who had overseen the council for 3 centuries. That gives all delegates time to consult with their governments and return with official positions. This meeting is adjourned. As the holographic screens began shutting down, and delegates started leaving, Kate Morris finally moved. She stood up gracefully, smoothed her jacket, and walked toward the exit with measured steps. Other delegates tried to approach her, wanted to ask questions or make threats, but her security detail politely blocked their paths. Only when she reached her private shuttle did Kate allow herself a genuine smile. She pulled out a secure communication device and typed a short, encrypted message. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, sending the words directly to Earth's military command, to the president, to everyone who needed to know. The message contained only 2 words. They've noticed. Back on Earth, in a command center buried deep beneath the surface, military leaders read the message and nodded to each other. They had expected this. They had planned for this. The Indomitable was never meant to be a secret forever. It was always going to be discovered eventually. A general looked at the ship's blueprints displayed on the wall. "So it begins," he said quietly. "So it begins," repeated his colleague. They knew what came next. The Council would demand answers. They would make threats. They would try to force humanity to back down. But what the Council did not know, what they could not possibly understand, was why humanity had really built the Indomitable. They assumed it was about power, about conquest, about threatening the galaxy. They could not have been more wrong. In 1 week, humanity would have to reveal secrets they had kept hidden for 50 years. Secrets about a war the galaxy knew nothing about. Secrets about an enemy that made every Council species look like children playing with toys. Secrets about why humanity needed ships that could move moons and bend light. Kate Morris looked out the shuttle window at the stars as she traveled back to Earth. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of explored space, an ancient threat was stirring. The Indomitable and her sister ships were not built for conquest. They were built for survival. They were built because humanity had learned a terrible lesson that the rest of the galaxy had somehow forgotten or never known. There are things in the dark between stars that are far worse than any galactic empire, and humanity had already met them once before. The small inspection shuttle moved slowly through the darkness of space, carrying 12 of the galaxy's most experienced military minds. Inside, General Rax of the Covarian fleet sat quietly, his 3-fingered hands gripping the armrests tighter than he wanted to admit. He had spent 40 years commanding warships. He had fought in brutal battles across 3 different sectors of the galaxy. He had seen weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars. But nothing in his long military career had prepared him for what waited ahead. Through the shuttle's viewport, the Indomitable came into view. General Rax felt his breath catch in his throat. The ship hung in a void like some ancient temple floating in space, dark and imposing. But what made his blood run cold were the scars. Deep gouges ran across the hull, burn marks that spoke of weapons fire, sections that had been repaired and reinforced. This was not some ceremonial vessel built to show off. This was a warship that had seen real combat, terrible combat, and survived. The weapon batteries covering the ship's surface made Rax's military implants go crazy. The tactical systems in his brain, designed to analyze threats, started flashing warning after warning. The weapons were arranged in patterns he had never seen before, following principles his 40 years of experience could not identify. Whatever technology humans had used to build this monster, it was nothing like what the rest of the galaxy possessed. A voice crackled over the communication system, calm and professional. "Inspection team, this is the Indomitable. Welcome aboard. We've been expecting you." On their screens appeared a human male, Captain Jack Mitchell. He looked to be in his 50s by human standards, with gray hair at his temples and eyes that seemed far too calm for someone commanding a ship that had terrified the entire Galactic Council. Those eyes had seen things, Rax realized. Bad things. The shuttle docked, and the inspection team stepped into the docking bay. General Rax stopped walking immediately. The bay was enormous. His entire fleet of 12 warships could have fit inside this single room with space left over. Maintenance crews worked on smaller vessels parked along the walls. Equipment and supplies were stacked in organized sections that stretched beyond his line of sight. A young human woman approached them, wearing a military uniform with lieutenant markings. "I'm Lieutenant Kelly Hayes, your guide for today. If you'll follow me, we'll begin the inspection tour." She looked young, maybe 30 years old, but she moved with the confidence of someone who had been through combat. Her posture was perfect, her awareness of her surroundings constant. Rax had trained enough soldiers to recognize a veteran when he saw one, regardless of age. They walked through corridors so wide that ground vehicles could drive through them side by side. The Kelrite scientist in their group, a crystalline being who usually remained composed, actually stammered as they passed crew quarters. These living sections, they're designed for how many people? 200,000 personnel, Lieutenant Hayes answered casually, as if that number was perfectly normal. Each crew member has private quarters. We also have communal recreation areas, training facilities, and support services. The Indomitable is designed to operate independently for years if necessary. The inspection team exchanged glances. 200,000 people. That was not a ship's crew. That was a city's population. That was an army. They continued deeper into the vessel. Engineering sections stretched for kilometers, containing machinery that hummed with power. The medical facilities they passed were larger and better equipped than hospitals on most planets. Storage bays contained enough food, water, and supplies to sustain the massive crew for what looked like decades. Finally, they reached the bridge. General Rax had commanded from dozens of different bridges in his career, but this was something else entirely. The command center was circular, with hundreds of workstations arranged in organized tiers. Each station displayed information in languages and symbols that made no sense to Rax's tactical implants. Officers worked quietly at their posts, monitoring systems and coordinates that the general could not begin to understand. Captain Mitchell stood at the center, hands clasped behind his back, watching the stars through a massive viewport. He turned as they entered. "Welcome to the bridge, General Rax. I hope the tour has been informative." Rax approached the tactical displays, his experienced eye trying to catalog what he saw. Weapon systems that operated on principles he did not recognize. Defense grids that seemed to bend space itself. Power readings that should not be possible with any known technology. His military training told him this ship could fight entire fleets and win. Unable to contain himself any longer, Rax asked a question that had been burning in his mind since they arrived. "Why, Captain? Why would humanity build something like this? What possible threat requires a vessel of this magnitude?" Captain Mitchell turned to look at the stars again, his expression distant. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "Protection, General. Just protection." "Protection from what?" Rax pressed, his frustration growing. Mitchell's jaw tightened slightly. "Some questions have answers you might not want to hear." A junior officer from Ambassador Vrel's staff, a young Vorentine named Krell, had been taking notes throughout the tour. Now he moved toward a corridor marked with restriction symbols. "What's in the restricted sections? What are you hiding?" Two human security personnel stepped smoothly into his path. They said nothing, made no threats, but their message was clear. Lieutenant Hayes moved beside Krell, her voice soft but firm. "Those sections contain classified materials. For your own safety and ours, some things cannot be shared." "Not yet." "Not yet?" the Kelrite scientist asked. "When then? When will humanity stop hiding secrets from the Council?" Hayes looked at Captain Mitchell, who nodded slightly. She turned back to the inspection team. "When you're ready to hear them. When the galaxy is ready to understand why ships like the Indomitable are necessary." The inspection was concluded shortly after. As they walked back to their shuttle, General Rax noticed details he had missed before. Crew members passing in the corridors wore patches on their uniforms showing battles and campaigns. But the symbols meant nothing to him. They were not from any conflict registered with the Galactic Council. Humans had fought wars the galaxy knew nothing about. The shuttle detached from the Indomitable and began its journey back to the Council station. General Rax pressed his face against the viewport, watching the massive ship grow smaller in the distance. For the first time in decades, he felt genuine fear settling into his bones. Not fear of what the ship could do to his fleet. Not fear of humanity conquering the galaxy. No, what terrified General Rax was simpler and far worse. Humanity had built this monster for protection. which meant somewhere out there, beyond the borders of known space, something existed that was dangerous enough to require a ship like the Indomitable, something that had left those battle scars across its hull, something that had killed enough humans to make them build not just one Titan-class vessel, but potentially more. As the shuttle jumped to faster-than-light travel, Rax made a decision. He would recommend the Council approve humanity's ships. Because if humans were the scared of something, the rest of the galaxy should be terrified. The attack happened so fast that nobody had time to think. 1 second. Everything was normal at the Galactic Institute's research station. Security monitors glowed green, showing all systems functioning perfectly. Scientists worked quietly in their labs. Guards patrolled empty corridors. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Warships from the Kresh Dominion appeared inside the station's defensive perimeter. They simply materialized out of nothing, using jump drive technology that should not have been possible. The station's shields were designed to detect incoming ships and raise barriers. But these ships bypassed every sensor, every warning system, every security measure that had taken decades to perfect. Lieutenant Commander Michael Torres was drinking coffee in the security office when the alarms finally screamed to life. He dropped his cup and lunged for the communication panel. Battle stations. All personnel to battle stations. We have hostile ships inside the perimeter. But even as he shouted the orders, Torres knew the truth. They were too late. The Kresh had planned this perfectly. Someone had given them inside information, told them exactly where the ancient cube was located, showed them the fastest route to reach it. This was not a random attack. This was a surgical strike. In the observation chamber where the cube was kept, Dr. James Porter stood frozen in front of the monitors. His face went pale as he watched security footage showing Kresh soldiers cutting through the station's outer hull with plasma torches. Sparks flew in the vacuum of space. Metal screamed and buckled. The soldiers moved with military precision, knowing exactly where to cut, exactly where to breach. They're heading straight for us. James shouted to his colleague. They're going for the artifact. We need to move it right now, get it somewhere safe. Beth Cooper, the station's chief engineer, was frantically typing commands into her console. Sweat dripped down her face as she pulled up containment protocols and emergency procedures. We can't move it, James. The cube is in active countdown mode. If we break the containment field now, if we disrupt the energy patterns, it could trigger whatever this thing does before we're ready. It could kill everyone on the station. James slammed his fist on the table in frustration. They were trapped. Moving the cube was dangerous. Leaving it here meant the Kresh would take it. There was no good choice, no safe option. The sounds of cutting grew louder. Then silence. Then a massive explosion as the Kresh commandos blew open the final door leading to the observation chamber. Smoke poured into the room. Through the haze, figures emerged wearing heavy combat armor and carrying weapons designed to punch through starship hulls. The lead soldier stepped forward, and James felt his heart sink. Commander Rask was a legend in the Kresh military, known for never failing a mission. His face was covered in scars from countless battles. His eyes were cold and calculating as he surveyed the room. Behind him, a dozen elite commandos fanned out, their weapons trained on every scientist in the chamber. The cube now belongs to the Kresh Dominion, Rask announced, his voice amplified by his helmet. Our intelligence services have determined this is a weapon created by the predecessor civilization. You will surrender it immediately, or you will be eliminated. You have 10 seconds to decide. James found his voice, though it shook with fear and anger. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't a weapon. If you try to move it, if you interfere with the countdown sequence, you'll trigger something that will kill us all. Please, you have to listen. Commander Rask's expression did not change. He did not blink. He did not hesitate. Your concerns are noted and dismissed. If moving the device results in casualties, that outcome is acceptable. We have our orders. He gestured to his team, and soldiers began moving toward the cube. James wanted to stop them, wanted to throw himself in their path, but the weapons pointed at his chest convinced him otherwise. Beth grabbed his arm, holding him back, tears streaming down her face. Then James noticed something strange. Dr. Rachel Bennett, one of their lead researchers, was standing at the cube with her hand pressed against its surface. She had been running tests when the attack started, but now she stood completely motionless, like a statue. Time dilation effects shimmered around her body, invisible waves of distorted light. Commander Rask saw her too. He raised his weapon and aimed directly at her head. "Human, remove your hand from the device immediately, or I will fire. You have 3 seconds." Rachel did not move, did not speak, did not even seem to breathe. To everyone watching, she appeared frozen in time. But the truth was far stranger. Inside Rachel's perception, time had slowed to an impossible crawl. The 30 seconds since she touched the cube had felt like hours to her consciousness. Every moment stretched and expanded, giving her time to think, to analyze, to understand. Her fingers, moving slowly in her dilated time frame, explored the cube's surface. She found what James had discovered in his earlier research, a second seam hidden beneath the glowing symbols. It was a trigger mechanism designed to activate something when pressed. In her stretched perception of time, Rachel's mind worked at incredible speed. She saw possibilities branching out before her like a massive tree, each choice leading to different futures. Her temporal perception, the rare ability that had made the cube respond to her, now showed her the consequences of every decision. If she did nothing, if she simply stood here frozen while the Kresh took the cube, she saw what would happen. They would try to weaponize it. Their scientists would poke and prod, trying to unlock its secrets. And then, accidentally, they would trigger a temporal cascade. Reality would fracture. 3 entire star systems would be unmade, erased from existence. Billions of lives snuffed out in an instant. If she pulled her hand away right now, the incomplete scan would cause the cube to shut down forever. It would lock its secrets away permanently. The Kresh attack would succeed in taking a useless artifact. But all the knowledge inside, whatever the predecessors had left for future civilizations, would be lost forever. But there was a third option. Rachel's fingers touched the trigger mechanism. She could press it fully, activate whatever the cube truly was. The risk was enormous. She had no idea what would happen, but in her expanded temporal awareness, she understood one thing clearly. The cube was not counting down to some catastrophic explosion. It was counting down to the end of its search, looking for someone like her, someone who could perceive time differently. Rachel made her choice. She pressed the trigger. Time stopped, not slowed down like before, not dilated, stopped completely. Commander Rask's weapon hung in midair, frozen. The energy bolt he had fired was suspended centimeters from James Porter's chest, a ball of deadly light caught between one moment and the next. Beth Cooper's scream of warning was silent, her mouth open, her face locked in an expression of pure terror. The Kresh soldiers floated motionless in the zero gravity of the damaged chamber, their bodies fixed in space-time like insects trapped in amber. Only Rachel could move. She stepped away from the cube, her hand leaving its surface. Her legs felt strange, as if she was walking through thick syrup. The cube's surface had transformed, now covered in flowing holographic text that shifted and changed. But somehow, Rachel could read it. The knowledge flowed directly into her mind, not through her eyes, not through translation, but through some kind of direct connection to her brain. She looked around at the frozen world and understood she had passed the test. And now she had to decide what came next. The cube responded to Rachel's touch, and suddenly her mind exploded outward. It was like standing in a dark room when someone turns on 1,000 lights at once. Her consciousness stretched across time itself, no longer confined to a single moment. She could see futures branching out in every direction, thousands upon thousands of possibilities, each one a different path humanity could take. The visions came fast, overwhelming her senses. She tried to focus on just one timeline to understand what she was seeing. In the first future, humanity welcomed the cube's gift with open arms. Scientists around the world celebrated as they unlocked the secrets of time manipulation. Within just 5 years, everything changed. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia simply vanished. Doctors could rewind a patient's body to before the illness took hold. Cancer, heart disease, aging itself, all became problems of the past. Poverty disappeared next, with the ability to see future stock markets, future inventions, future discoveries, humanity created unlimited wealth. No one went hungry. No one struggled for resources. Death itself became optional. People lived for centuries, then millennia, their bodies maintained in perfect condition through temporal manipulation. Rachel watched humanity spread across the galaxy as immortal gods, reshaping world with thought, bending reality to their will. It should have been paradise. But something went wrong. Without death, life lost its meaning. Without struggle, achievement became hollow. People stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped caring. They had eternity. So why rush? Why try? Why build anything when you could simply travel back and steal the idea from someone else's timeline? Then the rot truly set in. Humanity, with all this power and no purpose, turned cruel. They began manipulating other species, treating lesser civilizations like puppets. They rewrote history to make themselves heroes, erasing any moments where humans looked bad. They trapped entire populations in temporal loops, forcing aliens to relive their worst moments over and over again for entertainment. Within a century, humanity had created a nightmare spanning light years. Rachel watched civilization suffer under human tyranny, saw billions trapped in cycles of endless pain, watched her species become the monsters they once feared. No, Rachel whispered, but the cube was not done showing her possibilities. The vision shifted to a second timeline. Here, humanity tried to do better. They recognized the danger of temporal technology and established strict rules. Councils were formed. Committees were created to oversee every use of time manipulation. Laws were written. Safeguards were put in place. For a while, it worked. But power like this could not be contained by rules and committees. Disagreements emerged about how the technology should be used. Should they prevent wars before they started? Should they save people who were destined to die? Who got to decide which timeline was correct? Factions formed, each absolutely convinced their vision for reality was the right one. The Peace Coalition believed in preventing all conflict. The Natural Order movement insisted time should not be altered at all. The Progressive Front wanted to accelerate human evolution. Dozens of groups, all with access to time manipulation, all refusing to compromise. Then the temporal wars began. Rachel watched in horror as humanity fought itself across multiple timelines simultaneously. Soldiers died before they were born. Victories were unmade by enemies traveling to the past. Entire battles happened, and then unhappened, and then happened again differently. Generals went mad trying to plan strategies when the past kept changing. The paradoxes multiplied. A scientist would invent a device, then travel back to steal her own invention, creating a loop where the device was never actually invented by anyone. A city was destroyed, then saved, then destroyed again in a different way, until reality could not decide which version was true. Rachel watched her species tear itself apart across dimensions, creating wounds in the fabric of existence itself. Space-time began to crack under the strain. The universe itself was breaking. The vision shifted again, showing a third possibility. In this timeline, humanity saw the danger early and made a desperate choice. They decided to destroy the temporal technology completely, erase all knowledge of it, pretend they had never found the cube. But knowledge, once learned, cannot truly be unlearned. Scientists who had studied the technology remembered the principles. Some of them, driven by curiosity or greed or desperation, began reconstructing the theories from memory. They worked in secret, in hidden labs, away from government oversight. Criminal organizations got hold of fragments of the temporal equations. They weaponized pieces of the technology, creating devices that could age a person to death in seconds or trap them in time loops. Black markets emerged where people could buy temporal manipulation for the right price. Within 50 years, unauthorized time manipulation spread across human space like a plague. Hundreds of different groups, none of them coordinating, all messing with causality at the same time. The paradoxes became catastrophic. Rachel watched stars explode into supernovas and then unexplode back into normal stars. She saw civilizations rise to greatness and fall to ruin simultaneously. She watched planets exist and not exist in the same moment. The universe itself began screaming as causality unwound like a broken thread. Reality started to collapse. not just in one place, but everywhere. The fundamental laws that held existence together were breaking down. Matter forgot how to be matter. Time forgot how to flow forward. Space forgot how to have dimensions. Stop. Rachel shouted into the vision. Please, I've seen enough. The flood of futures finally slowed. Rachel found herself back in the frozen moment, standing in the observation chamber with the cube. Her mind reeled from everything she had witnessed. 3 different futures, 3 different approaches, and all of them ending in disaster. But the cube was not finished teaching her. New visions appeared, showing her something even more terrifying. The cube revealed the history of the predecessors themselves, the ancient civilization that had built it millions of years ago. The predecessors had been like humanity once, curious and ambitious and brilliant. They too had discovered temporal manipulation. They too had believed they could handle such power responsibly. They too had established councils and rules and safeguards. And they too had failed. Rachel watched the predecessor civilization tear itself apart in exactly the same ways she had just witnessed for humanity. They fought temporal wars. They created paradoxes. They broke causality. But unlike in the visions where humanity destroyed itself, the predecessors made a different choice at the end. They ran away, unable to fix what they had broken, unable to handle the responsibility of godlike power. The predecessors abandoned normal reality entirely. They ascended to a higher dimension where time worked differently, where their mistakes could not threaten the universe anymore. But before they left, they created the cubes. They scattered them across the galaxy as tests, as warnings, as desperate hopes that someday some species would prove wiser than they had been, that someone would make the right choice when offered ultimate power. The cube's voice filled Rachel's mind, speaking directly to her consciousness. We left these devices not to grant power, but to test wisdom. We hope that someday someone will be strong enough to refuse what we could not resist. The greatest test is not whether you can wield this power, but whether you can walk away from it. Rachel stood in the frozen moment, surrounded by motionless people, staring at the cube that offered everything and demanded everything in return. She finally understood what the real test was. It was not about being worthy of power. It was about being wise enough to reject it. The cube showed Rachel one more vision, but this one felt different from the others. It was quieter, simpler, more real. She saw humanity continuing forward without the cube's power, without control over time itself, without the ability to reshape reality. In this future, humans still struggled. They still got sick and died. They still fought wars and made terrible mistakes. They still lost people they loved and grieved for them. Natural disasters still destroyed cities. Accidents still claimed lives. The universe remained dangerous and uncaring. But something beautiful happened too. Rachel watched humanity grow through their struggles. Every challenge they faced taught them something new. Every mistake made them wiser. Every loss made them appreciate what they had. Scientists worked for decades to cure diseases instead of simply rewinding time. Engineers built better ships through trial and error instead of stealing designs from other timelines. People valued their lives precisely because those lives were limited and precious. Humans remain flawed. They remain mortal. They remain finite. But they also remain human, with all the creativity and compassion and stubborn determination that made them special. They reached for the stars not as gods, but as explorers. They helped other species not through manipulation, but through genuine cooperation. It was not paradise, but it was real, and it was enough. Rachel's temporal perception caught something else in the cube's projections, something subtle that most people would have missed. The way the visions were presented, the tone of the cube's voice, the careful selection of what to show her. This was not just an offer. This was a warning disguised as temptation. You're not actually offering us this technology, are you? Rachel said slowly, understanding dawning. You're warning us away from it. You want me to refuse. That's the whole point of this test. The cube's response came immediately, and Rachel could almost feel relief in its communication. Yes, we left these devices across the galaxy not to find species worthy of temporal power, but to find species wise enough to reject it. The predecessors failed this test. We took the power and it destroyed us. Our greatest hope, before we fled to another dimension, was that someday someone would prove stronger than we were, that someone would make the choice we could not. Rachel nodded, her decision crystallizing. But before she could speak it aloud, something caught her attention in the frozen scene around her. Commander Rast's tactical display hung motionless in the air, its screen frozen mid-update. Rachel moved closer, reading the information displayed there. Her blood ran cold. The creche had detailed intelligence about the cube. They knew its exact location within the research station. They knew which corridors to take. They knew the access codes. They even knew the research team schedules and security protocols. This level of information could only come from one source. Someone on the inside had betrayed them. Who? Rachel demanded, turning back to the cube. Who gave the creche this information? Who sold us out? The cube's temporal vision activated again, showing her the truth. One of the researchers on their team, someone Rachel had worked with for months, had been contacted by creche intelligence agents. They had promised power, wealth, a position of importance in the new order. Once the creche controlled temporal technology, greed and ambition had done what threats could never accomplish. But the vision showed more. Rachel watched a timeline where the creche succeeded in stealing the cube. She saw their scientists attempting to unlock its secrets through brute force. She watched them accidentally trigger a temporal cascade when they tried to weaponize it. The cascade spread outward like ripples in a pond. But instead of water, it was reality itself that rippled. 3 entire star systems simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not blown up. They were unmade, erased from the timeline as if they had never been there. Billions of people, dozens of civilizations, all gone in an instant. And the cascade was still spreading when the vision ended. I have to stop them, Rachel said urgently. If I let them take the cube, all those people die. I need to use this power to prevent that future from happening. But if you use the power, the cube responded quietly, you begin down the same path that destroyed the predecessors. You start with good intentions, using temporal manipulation to save lives. Then you use it to prevent other disasters. Then to fix mistakes. Then to reshape society into what you think it should be. The road to tyranny is paved with noble intentions. Rachel felt trapped. So what do I do? Let billions die because I'm afraid of becoming a tyrant? That's not a choice, that's cowardice. It is the paradox that destroyed my creators. The cube acknowledged. Power that must be used to prevent catastrophe. But using that power leads inevitably to catastrophe of a different kind. There is no clean answer, no perfect solution, only difficult choices with terrible consequences either way. Rachel looked around at her frozen colleagues. James Porter with an energy bolt frozen centimeters from his chest. Beth Cooper screaming a warning that had never finished leaving her mouth. The creche soldiers frozen in the act of stealing something they did not understand. Her mind raced through possibilities. If she accepted the cube's power and used it to stop the creche, she would save billions. But she would also prove to the galaxy that humans had control over time itself. Other species would demand access to the technology. Wars would be fought over it. The exact spiral of destruction she had witnessed in her visions would begin. If she refused the power and let events play out naturally, the creche might succeed. Billions might die in the temporal cascade, but humanity would remain mortal, flawed, and crucially, unable to break the universe. Unless there was a third option. Can you stop them? Rachel asked the cube. Not me using your power. You directly. Can you prevent the creche from taking you and causing that cascade? I am a machine, the cube replied. I cannot act independently. I can only respond to those who interface with me. You are the first in 2 million years to successfully connect. Only you can direct my actions. Rachel closed her eyes, thinking hard. There had to be a way. Some solution that did not require her to either abandon billions to death or accept power that would eventually corrupt her species. Then it came to her. A simple answer that had been there all along. What happens if I refuse your power but ask you to complete one specific action before deactivating forever? Rachel asked carefully, not giving me control over time, not granting humanity godlike abilities. Just one single intervention, programmed now and executed automatically, with no possibility of future use. The cube was silent for a moment, processing this loophole. That would be acceptable within my parameters. One action, carefully defined, executed independently, after which I permanently deactivate and cannot be reactivated by any means. What action do you request? Rachel looked at Commander Rask's frozen form, at the tactical displays showing all the intelligence the Kresh possessed. She thought about the traitor on their team, about the billions who would die, about the terrible choice before her. When time resumes, Rachel said slowly, I want you to erase all knowledge of your existence from the minds of everyone who learned about you, except me and my immediate research team. The Kresh won't remember why they came here. The traitor won't remember what they leaked. The galaxy will forget you exist, and then you will deactivate forever, taking your secrets with you. And what will you do with your memory of me? The cube asked. Rachel smiled sadly. I'll make sure humanity learns the most important lesson, that some power is too dangerous to wield, no matter how good our intentions. That wisdom sometimes means walking away, that being human, flawed and mortal, is enough.